So tech consolidation is a pretty important issue that I think everybody who has any interest online should care about, especially like if you run a business, you do a show like myself, or when it comes to the information you're exposed to. So right now, big tech companies, they've got a near monopoly online. You got Alphabet, you got Meta, you got Twitter, Apple, etc. They're all acting as gatekeepers against competition. They employ algorithms that, unfairly target small creators. No matter what side you're on when it comes to the political aisle, you have these gatekeeping algorithms. You also have, tech censorship. You've got prioritization by these companies of their own products that they're developing on their own platforms. That gives them and their allies some very large advantages over smaller creators, smaller businesses, and potential competition. And of course, that has the effect of harming consumers. So now Congress is actually debating two bills to try to put a stop to that. The first one's proposed by Senator Amy Klobuchar, and is backed by Chuck Grassley, and that's dubbed the American Innovation and Choice Online Act. And then you have Senators Richard Blumenthal and Marsha Blackburn. They have proposed the Open App Markets Act. Now, again, with me here to talk about this is activist, filmmaker, comedian, friend of the show, Ron Placone. Ron.
What's up, Jeff? Yeah, great. Solid summary there, man. And yeah, those are the two bills in question. They do have a ton of bipartisan support, which usually bipartisan means they agreed on a really terrible idea. But every now and again, there's an exception, and this is one of those exceptions. These are good, important antitrust bills. This is solid legislation. And here is what they do. So we'll start with Open Apps Market Act. These bills are commonly referred to as OMA and ACOA. So we'll go to OMA first, the Open Market Apps. So in the App Store, they are dominated by Google and Apple. Those are the big players on campus when it comes to apps. And if you are an independent or an alternative app, you have to pay exorbitant fees and these ridiculous commission rates just to be in the store. And then guess what? The software may or may not work on people's devices because Apple, they kind of dictate that stuff. This bill puts an end to that. This bill levels the playing field, say, hey, everyone gets to have their app out there. You don't get to dictate and prioritize your apps over everyone else because you own the marketplace. So everyone gets their app there, and users get to decide what software does and doesn't work on their device. ACOA, this is a really interesting one. So when you do a search, in particular on Google and Amazon, which is where most online searching happens. About 90% of online searches happen via Google. Pretty much like at least half of all online commerce happens on Amazon. So when you search one of those platforms, they will prioritize their own products and services over everyone else's, over other vendors. An example that was highlighted on John Oliver's show over the weekend, actually, which I highly recommend that segment. It's pretty funny, and it really does break down what's going on with these bills. Say there's a design bag that a bunch of people like, and people are buying it from a vendor who has their stuff on Amazon, because you kind of have to. If you're going to sell stuff online, you kind of have to be on Amazon. You don't really have a choice. Amazon harvests your data. So they know that, a bunch of people like this bag. So what do? Well, they get a generic of that bag made, and then they prioritize that generic in the search results. They sell it for a cheaper price, and they just bury all the other results. So you're just seeing their stuff. And they do this for virtually everything. So it completely puts the thumb on the scale for their own products and services. Google does something commonly known as data scraping. What that means is, say I Google, whatever, sharks, whatever, like doesn't matter. Google will show me their own products and services, their own content that they've scraped from other websites, and they'll put those results first. And I might have to go to the second or third page, which, if you're going to the second or third page, you might as well not be in the results at all. We know how this works, to get other websites. So it's basically taking their content but not giving them the traffic, which of course would hurt any online business. ACOA eliminates these practices. It says, look, you cannot favor your own products and services over everyone else. You just need to show the results, the way it should be. Just generally, the way the internet is supposed to be is just a super information highway where everyone has a shot. So these are two very important antitrust pieces of legislation. And I like how you brought up how it affects content creators. While
Mm-hmm.
these two bills do not affect address creators directly, you know what I mean?
Right.
It does affect us too, because look, we all have to deal with the YouTube algorithm, and
Yep.
nobody likes it. It is not fun. YouTube prioritizes corporate news over independent news. Why? Because they want people to subscribe to YouTube TV, and corporate news outlets are their partners there.
Mm-hmm.
So what this does is it helps to start break up these corporate big tech juggernauts so that they don't have the power that they have anymore. And this is super important for the future of the internet. So I encourage everyone to go to antitrustsummer.com. Please sign the petition, because here's what's going on, Jeff. Chuck Schumer promised to vote on this bill next week. He said, week of June 20th, we're getting a vote. Well, we haven't heard a confirmation on that vote yet.
Right.
According to several Reuters articles, they have the votes to pass in the Senate and the House. And there's a lot of broad support for this thing. Everyone from Josh Hawley to Bernie Sanders supports this thing, which shows you, and again, you said this in the intro, and you said it very well. We all agree, whether you're on the left or the right or anything in between, pretty much everyone agrees, except for these tech lobbyists, that big tech has way too much freaking power. We all agree on that. People don't agree on every solution, but everyone agrees they have way too much power. And this antitrust enforcement is basic enforcement that starts breaking these companies up. And we got a real shot at this. And at the end of the day, it's like, what do you want for the future of the internet? Do you want the internet to be a democratizing super information highway the way it's supposed to be, the way it became cool in the first place? Or do you want it to continue to descend into a capitalist, monopolistic hellscape, which is the direction it's going? So please, antitrustsummer.com, sign the petition. It takes less than a minute. We got to keep the pressure on to get the vote that was promised. Because here's the thing about Chuck Schumer. He promised this vote. But guess what? Chuck Schumer's got two daughters. One of them is an Amazon lobbyist. The other one works for Meta, which, of course, is Facebook's company.
Facebook, yeah.
So, you know, we got to keep the pressure on, because they'd be happy to just let this go, Jeff. And you know what will happen? If they let this go, Congress is going to go on recess, which they've been working very hard. They are
very, very hard.
But they will go on recess, and then when they get back, they're going to be focused on the midterms and nothing else. So they're just going to let this fall by the wayside. We can't let them do it. They would love for this to happen, because God knows big tech has their ear big time, and they're lobbying this big time. And I know you got some specific numbers.
Oh, I got some numbers, yeah.
We can't let them do this. We need to force this vote. So please, antitrustsummer.com, please.
Yeah. Again, to get back to the numbers that you were talking about and the lobbying, first let's go to some polling, right? Because this has massive, as you said, bipartisan support. 76% of the American people back the American Innovation and Choice Online Act. The Open Markets Act, 80% support. 70% of the American people agree that this country has a growing monopoly problem, which is, doesn't have to do with the game. No, this is not a game. It's real. There is a real monopoly problem, especially in big tech. Yeah, instead they've used it as a blueprint. Yeah. And so they agree that, we need to hold Amazon, Facebook, Google, and Apple accountable when they abuse their dominance in the marketplace to hurt small businesses and reduce competition. The same survey shows that people aren't buying some of the industry lines. Now, Ron, you mentioned some of the arguments they're using against this. Why don't you give some examples?
Well, the biggest argument they use, which is just complete and utter hogwash, is they're making, there are certain things that a lot of people rely on. Something like Google Maps, for instance. I'll be honest, I have a terrible sense of direction, Jeff. I live in Los Angeles. I use Google Maps all the freaking time, all right? And they're making these arguments like, well, with legislation like this, we might not be able to offer you your Amazon Prime anymore. We might not be able to offer you your Google Maps anymore. That is a bunch of hogwash and such an empty threat. They're not going to take away things that everyone uses that helps make them the juggernauts that they are, nor does this legislation in any way make them do that. This legislation does not stop Amazon, Google, or anybody from offering any products or services they want to offer. All it does is it stops the monopolistic practices that these big companies are doing that make it impossible for anybody to compete or have a chance. That's what it does. It's antitrust legislation. It's breaking up these big tech monopolies.
Exactly. And by the way, a lot of people are not buying that argument. In fact, that same poll, going back to that, 73% of them agree that that's just another false scare tactic used by big tech. So understand that, again, the American people are on board, and you have even Republicans, progressives, and even so-called moderate, corporate Democrats that are even like, well, we probably should at least bring this up for a vote or do something about this. But again, you did mention Chuck Schumer and the ties to the industry. And so, big surprise, you have a lot of lobbying going on by the industry that is starting to have an impact. And so, look, let's go to the Washington Post here, which, by the way, Washington Post, owned by Bezos. So it's interesting to see that they actually did an objective report on this. In fact, they wrote that in recent months, industry-funded groups like the CCIA and central liberal groups, we'll just call corporate groups, including New Democracy, have pumped millions into TV and digital ads, slamming one key antitrust proposal as misguided and dangerous. The CCIA is a trade group that counts Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google as members, and they took out about $8 million in TV ads early this year, targeting swing states like Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and Wisconsin, according to the independent news site The Lever. CCIA also took out $2 million in ads in New Hampshire, according to the New Hampshire Journal. New Democracy has taken out at least $167,000 in Facebook ads and over $218,000 in Google ads that call on a narrow set of swing state Democrats to reject this bill. At least 7 of the members of New Democracy that they list on their website, including its director and communications contact, are also employees of something called the Progressive Policy Institute, which is not progressive. That's another corporate think tank, which has received funding from Google, Amazon, and Facebook, according to data compiled by the Tech Transparency Project. And that lobbying, that blitz, has led to at least 10 Democrats privately saying, I don't know if I can support this. I mean, we have real concerns. We have concerns about the midterms, Ron, that we should be focused on inflation and just let this go by. Let me give you some of their names. You have, this is according to Politico, Senator Maggie Hassan's staffer representing her campaign, who raised objections to these bills, which means, of course, that they're generally coming from her, along with California Senators Alex Padilla, Dianne Feinstein, Colorado's Michael Bennet, Delaware Senator Chris Coons, and Vermont Senator Patrick Leahy, among others. Those are the people who are very...
Jeff, can I add something real quick there?
Absolutely.
Notice some of the locations here. Not all of them, but notice some of the locations here. Silicon Valley.
Yep.
Colorado is a big tech hub now. So, you could really follow the money. And it's not shocking who is opposed to this. It really isn't shocking. And usually it's just very corporate Democrats to begin with. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, this is nonsense. And anyone who's not supporting this is definitely completely bought and paid for. This is an incredibly popular piece of legislation. And I'm sure even the people who will vote for it, they probably aren't thrilled about having to vote for it, because we all know that big tech has the ear of our politicians. Look, Joe Biden started his campaign with a bunch of Comcast execs. We know that they've infiltrated our politics, both parties and all of the above. But this is one of those things. It is so overwhelmingly popular. If we scream loud enough, they kind of got to give us this win. So, please, everyone, go to antitrustsummer.com. Another thing I wanted to add when you were bringing up public opinion, Amazon, and this was also on the John Oliver segment, and it's so funny what they tried to pull. Amazon emailed a bunch of their third-party vendors, like, people who use Amazon, and they told them about these bills, and they said, oh, you guys really shouldn't support these bills. We're looking out for you. And the people emailed them back, and they said, screw, what are you talking about? We support these bills. You guys can't do the nonsense you're doing. You're screwing us over. And look, there is a history of antitrust legislation in the United States. There's a history of wins and there's a history of losses. I'm going to talk about a win. AT&T. Jeff, you and I, as elder millennials, we remember when AT&T had a monopoly on the phone lines. We remember that. And what happened was long distance calling was insanely expensive, and there was no other game in town. It was AT&T. They imposed some antitrust legislation. What happened after that? Well, a bunch of other companies sprouted up. Long distance calling became infinitely more affordable. And guess what else happened? We got some inventions like the answering machine. Later, we got an invention called the modem that helped lead to the World Wide Web as we know it today. So, that's why, like, even on, you hear conservatives say things like innovation and competition. This is totally, the system that we have now is totally anti-competitive, and you can't deny that. It's not until you impose some antitrust and break up monopolies that you can really see what we're capable of. So, you bring it back to what we face as creators. I don't love relying on YouTube. I don't think anybody does. Well, if things don't get broken up, we're not going to know what the next YouTube might be. We're not going to know what the future could hold for creators like us and what platforms may be out there that aren't even going to get a chance to get off the ground yet. So, that's an example of when antitrust legislation actually was enforced. And of course, it frickin' worked. When did we miss the mark on antitrust legislation? Well, we had a chance to put it on the banks. We didn't. We had a chance to put it on housing. We didn't. We missed those marks. Look at where we're at now. Does it look great out there? No, it doesn't. That's part of the reason why. And as we are in a true global village, Jeff, we gotta make sure we have the right legislation for the internet. And this is a huge, huge, huge first step. So please, antitrustsummer.com, sign the petition. It takes less than a minute, folks, and we need you.